Tonight, our goal is to walk through what is stewardship and what can it look like in a year-round setting. I am Erin Weber-Johnson. I'm a financial resource consultant here at the Episcopal Church Foundation. Now, the Episcopal Church Foundation has a very specific mission. Our mission is that we look to strengthen leadership because leadership is responsible for mission. Now, we do that by strengthening both leadership and financial capabilities of Episcopal congregations, dioceses, and communities of faith in order to pursue their mission and ministry. We do that through a variety of ways, most visually through the Episcopal Church Vital Practices, Foundation Vital Practices. Now, leaders establish mission and mission attracts support. So the Episcopal Church Foundation teaches church institutions how to raise funds, discuss their use, and manage them responsibly and effectively. We also offer workshops on stewardship training, annual giving, planned giving, capital campaigns. We offer individual Episcopalians a wide range of planned giving instruments. I know that there were some of you who expressed interest in planned giving. We also manage capital campaigns, assist congregations and dioceses in establishing endowments, and manage over $100 million in Episcopal endowment funds nationwide. Now, we're going to talk a bit about mission today, and that's because at the root of any stewardship or fundraising opportunity, there needs to be a clear mission. If you're clear about your mission, the funding will indeed follow. So, what can we expect to learn today? We will walk through how and why people give to the church, utilizing thank you to educate, talking about what are some real clear year-round activities, not just talking about a theoretical or a theological framework, which is important, but also supporting you with some real easy practical ways for implementation year-round, and connecting these activities then to donors' characteristics. Because if we've learned anything about the Episcopal Church, it's that one size just does not fit all. Episcopalians are diverse and vibrant, and so should our stewardship activities be. So let's get started. A quick poll. Thank you, Terry. What is stewardship? I'm going to ask you to participate in this poll. So in order to keep your laptop from blacking out, this is a great opportunity to use that mouse and ask, what is stewardship? Is it an annual pledge campaign? Is it a term for how we fund the mission and ministry of the church? Is it prudent decisions about the budget? Is it a churchy term for fundraising? All of the above or none of the above? I'm going to take a moment to allow you to start filling out those results. Let me know what you think, and we'll see what collectively our knowledge base is about stewardship. I'll give you about 15 seconds. Good. Thank you for those who've already started. Terry, I should have included some background music for our poll. All right. I'm going to give about 10 more seconds. Here's your chance to participate. All right. 3, 2, 1. So it looks like about 4 of us think of annual pledge campaign when we think of the word stewardship. 6 of us thought it was a term for how we fund the mission and ministry of the church. 25 said all of the above, and 2 wrote none of the above. Aha, this is helpful. Well, stewardship is the way that we use and manage and utilize our resources to carry on our mission in the world. For the church, we know through our baptismal covenant that this mission is to reconcile ourselves to God and to one another. Most of us think immediately of money when we hear the word stewardship. We recall that time in our congregation's life when we were asked to make a financial commitment for the coming year. At some level, however, we're all aware that stewardship is far more than money. Stewardship is how we live out our calling as followers. Stewardship is what we do after we say what we believe. I love that line. It's what we do after we say what we believe. So how does that look? Well, first let's take a step back and say, what is the landscape for giving across all nonprofits? Because I think that that's going to help us connect with an on-ramp for stewardship. If we look at what nonprofits are doing, we can see that there is a substantial amount of giving that takes place. In 2013, this is a pie chart of the 2013 contributions. $335.17 billion were contributed to nonprofits. Now, when I say nonprofits, it includes religious entities. This includes health. This includes education. This includes the broadband of 501c3s. Now, this is something very interesting because if you look closely, I hope that you can, you'll see that individuals make up 72% of the contributions for nonprofits. 15% then were made up of foundations, 8% made up of bequests, 5% of corporations. Now, oftentimes when I work with parishes on capital campaigns, on planned giving, on annual giving, what I hear from people is, gosh, I wish we could find that foundation or that grant to bolster our contributions. But I'm here to tell you and to really encourage you that when looking at this chart, the bulk of contributions received came from individuals. For example, if you look at bequests, that accounts for 8%. Obviously, bequests are made by individuals. Oftentimes, foundations are family foundations. And so thinking about that 72% actually is much larger across other sections of that pie. But now, where did those contributions go? Well, of that $335 billion, the largest percentage, the largest piece of that pie went to religious organizations, 31%. The next largest was to education, and then followed by human services. So this is interesting in that this is sort of where the rubber hits the road, because while religion makes up 31%, it was down 1% from the previous year. And what you'll see is that since 1975, it's been on a 1 to 2% decline each year. So a total of 14% decline since 1975 to religious organizations. But we know from those that gave to health organizations and to public society organizations, art and culture, that the top 3 reasons why people give is because of a belief in the cause, respect for staff leadership, and fiscal responsibility. So when thinking about stewardship, when thinking about it year-round, the first question we must ask is, so why are we doing this? Why are we here? If stewardship is the use of resources for the carrying out of our mission in the world, for the reconciliation of one another and ourselves to God, then at the heart of stewardship is mission. The why. I get kind of excited about the why. When we think about fundraising, we often think about what happens in the fall, and that's something that we are going to need to unmarry or unhinge tonight, this idea that stewardship is annual giving in the fall. Indeed, if you think about stewardship as a year-long financial process, then if we think about it a year long, then oftentimes the least visible parts of the process are the most important. This is the first place where people go wrong. The work of communicating how the need relates to your vision and mission, how giving supports it, is often the most neglected part of the process. Oftentimes, what happens January through September is what is the most important, impactful building blocks in order to ensure that everyone has a common theology and a common understanding of how funds are used. So the next slide is one that is often the one that's most disconcerting. And the reason for the disconcerting is that people ask me, well, I don't know what to do about stewardship year-round. There's no way that I can invite people to make a gift all year round. People will become fatigued, and that's where we hear about donor fatigue. How can we talk about stewardship without asking people for money and without people getting tired of hearing about it? This is where the good news comes in, because the next question I have to ask is, well, how many times are you thanking those that donate to your mission, those that give of their time and their talent? So if we know that the best practice for fundraising is that we want to be in contact with people for an invitation 5 times, on the other hand, we know that the best practice for fundraising for thanking people across all nonprofits is that we need to thank our donors and volunteers 7 different times each year. That is the best practice in the nonprofit fundraising field, thanking people 7 different ways. Now, I can hear some of you saying, well, that's a lot of thank you cards. And yes, there is probably going to be some thank you cards in there, but I actually would like to uplift this idea of saying thank you as a way of communicating both your mission and your stewardship theology throughout the year. This is a great on-ramp for saying, hey, this is how we've used your gifts. More to come on that later. Now, if we think about stewardship as more than just pledging, which is very important, but also the use of our time and our talent, then we need to ask, well, what does volunteering have to do with year-round stewardship? Well, how we treat our volunteers is certainly connected to stewardship in our annual giving. You may be surprised to know that volunteering is at a 10-year low across all nonprofits. I was surprised. The volunteer rate declined by about 1 percentage point for the past 10 years. And as of 2014, it's at its lowest level of engagement. Now, some say it's purely the economy's fault. And they're not necessarily wrong. But what we need to realize is that economy is actually a reflection of our nonprofit. If the economy is down, fundraising and volunteering are often down. But why is that? Why is this truth? Won't people have more time to invest in their favorite missions if they're unemployed? Certainly that's what we hope. What we find out is that there is a counterintuitive connection between volunteering, and this really impacts how we see stewardship. You are more likely to volunteer if you're employed than if you aren't. And states with higher rates of unemployment tend to have a lower rate of volunteering. So there's not a connection between having free time and devoting your time for a charity or for your parish. So this tells us that wishful narrative between volunteering might be that it might somehow be the silver lining of a bad economy. It's a mistaken notion, because actually the most important thing separating volunteers from non-volunteers is not free time. Instead, workers need to know that their jobs are meaningful and they are more likely to be engaged and less likely to leave their volunteer and employment positions if you can connect the work that's being done in volunteer positions to the mission of the church. If people know that what they're doing makes a difference in the overall mission and they are thanked 7 different ways accordingly throughout the year, that is a great way of speaking to stewardship and making sure people stay connected. So let's talk a little bit about gratitude. Your thanks should be timely and it should be personal, done in a way that evokes your mission. Timely means getting official letters out within a week. So if you see someone volunteering in an extra special capacity, making sure that you email, you text, you receive notes of thanks or one-on-one thanks quickly, especially for those millennials that are used to 24-hour turnaround, that's going to be very important. A personal, tell a story of how their giving has impacted your life and evocative of mission. So one of our, what we like to call our core text or a textbook for capital campaigns and annual giving is a book called The Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. It encompasses the writings from many of his books, but focuses on community, fundraising, and transformation. This is a great gift for your stewardship committee members, or also this is a great piece of work for any book studies in your parish, or if you want to develop a common theology in your parish around stewardship, this is a great book to utilize. And one of the quotes that I like to use from Henry Nouwen is, people have a need for friendship and for community, that fundraising has to be community building. I wonder how many churches and charitable organizations realize that community is one of the greatest gifts we have to offer. If we ask for money, it means we offer a new way of belonging. When we think of stewardship, that community is part of that. When we think about our mission of reconciling one another, thinking about how to utilize our gift of community year-round is going to be an important component of that. So let's get to the nuts and bolts a bit. The first thing that I like to recommend doing is to separate the idea of stewardship formation from the annual campaign. You cannot do all of your formation for stewardship in the fall and expect to see people as engaged, especially because of different particular generational characteristics. We know that those in, say, the Generation X and millennials are used to fall campaigns and tend to tune out a bit for formative opportunities. So looking for ways January through September in order to bolster up your stewardship is going to be very important. Teaching giving as a spiritual practice to everyone. You know, this is an important component. Cast a vision that giving is integral to your life as a Christian. Have a rule of life, maybe a 10-10-80 rule where sectioning out your budget where different funds will be used and allocated. Integrate stewardship into your other formation programs, such as confirmation. Teaching giving as a spiritual practice for your new members. Oftentimes people ask me, well, when should a person receive a pledge card? And I like to tell people that if I were a new member, when would you invite me to join the choir? When would you invite me to come to a potluck? If we believe that fundraising is ministry and that we're inviting people into a deeper community and into a deeper spiritual life, then inviting people into giving is part of their mission, our mission to reconcile them to one another and to God. That's a core component of our mission theology, and it should not be overlooked. So I have a question from Alice. How do we thank people in a way that reflects our mission? That's wonderful. I am going to give a few other practical ideas coming up in a few slides, but I want you to know that it's coming. I have seen it. We've got a number of different books out there. I mentioned the Henry Nouwen book. There are some other books that I would highly recommend for adult readers. Matt Bell, Money, Purpose, Joy, Money and Faith, Simpler Living, Compassionate Life. Participating in a Lenten series around this has been really rather beneficial for many parishes because, as any community understands, if you have a common vocabulary, then this allows you to bring up theology in a regular way, not just in the fall. So here are some books that I would recommend to you all. The 1-minute stewardship sermons are often very effective. Now, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the millennial generation. We know that the millennial generation is actually just graduating from high school. So that is an interesting edge to our spiritual formation, because what we know is that Pew Research from the last 3 years tells us that the giving generation, or the giving characteristics from the millennial generation, actually are similar to the greatest generation, which were the folks that built up the church as we know it today. They tend to be the most sacrificial of all of our givers of all the generations. Often people express surprise about that. But as we've seen in many different political elections, one of the things that's very noteworthy about the millennial generation is that they are passionately connected to causes. And they may not be connected to institutions, but they are willing to donate, for example, setting politics aside, but using it specifically as a fundraising example. If you look at the last 2 presidential elections, these were definitely highlighted by a large showing of support from the millennial generation to give online. And these givers gave without any type of narrative budget or impact study. They gave out of a sense of passion and connection to a cause. So what I like to recommend then is for us to look at books for youth also on stewardship, and there's a good number. So feel free to take a look. These are from different age levels. Stewardship formation occurs at a very early age, and it cannot be emphasized that the way that we form our young ones is the way that they will continue to view their collective resources, not just their money, but their time and their talent, their volunteerism. You know, for many of those in the millennial generation, they're expected to give of their time to social organizations as a requirement for graduation from high school and college. And so taking an opportunity to form them for giving that in a spiritual way that brings life to them is going to be important. Now, there was a question about, are there any Spanish books about spiritual formation around giving in Spanish? And I wanted you all to know that the Episcopal Church Foundation is working on Spanish sources specifically for this. And so this is certainly something that we've identified as a need. And I'm grateful that this once again reaffirms that the need is out there. And we hope to have that information out very quickly. So when thinking of ways to thank donors, coming back to Alice's question, thanking becomes a means of showing stewardship. So Alice asked, how do we thank people in a way that reflects our mission? Well, here is where the rubber meets the road a bit. Year-round ministry moments, 1 minute. This is something that I've seen be exceptionally successful in parishes. I want you to imagine what it would look like on a Sunday morning for your choir or your bell choir to engage in a beautiful anthem or musical piece. And then after they've finished and everybody is in awe of what they've just heard, for your priest or your vicar or your senior warden to stand up and just in less than 1 minute say, you know, I just want to thank all of you in the pews who have made a pledge to our parish, because it's because of your donation that 22% of your donation has gone to our music ministry. And I want to thank you, because if it wasn't for your donation, we couldn't enjoy beautiful pieces like this. Thank you. This is a great way to say thank you, to connect their gift to something very tangible, what they've just heard and experienced. And then also then to continue being very transparent about how the resources are being utilized. Another great way, baskets of thanks. What I like to suggest is creating a list of all the different ministries in your parish and assign a vestry member to go out to different vestry member for different ministries, but have a basket of thanks, whether that be a basket of cookies or a basket of muffins, but have a vestry member go to that ministry and say, thank you for the ways that you have volunteered, and remind people that it's because of their donation that this ministry is able to continue. So say you were going to a meeting of the children's Sunday school teachers, and you go and say, man, thank you so much for the ways that you are volunteering your time and forming our young adults. And I also want to say thank you for your pledges, because if it wasn't for your pledges, 13% of our budget would not be going to this, because we wouldn't have it. We wouldn't be able to have such a vibrant ministry. So not only am I grateful for the ministry that you have been participating in, I'm also very grateful for your pledge and the way that it's impacting our church life. This has been very, very successful in tying volunteer time with their gifts, which we know that particular generations need to see that connection made. The greater the level of engagement, the greater their gift will be. Making sure that you have a space in your parish newsletter or in your parish bulletin for a volunteer of the week or the month. A lot of times, parishes back away from that, saying, oh gosh, there might be people in our community that might not want to be named, or what if it becomes a competitive feeling? And I'm here to tell you that quite often, if you keep this going in a long-term way, but not just a 6-month one-off, but rather a year-round exercise of thanking people, this can be really life-giving. It can be a really collaborative process of people raising those unseen people, that person that makes sure that those bulletins make it from the parish office to the pew in time, that person that makes sure that Marge, who doesn't have a ride on Sunday, make sure that Marge gets there. These are the volunteers that need to be thanked. Another great way of connecting your mission to your thank you, your 7 different thank yous, is to have recipients of actual outreach ministries come and speak. We spend time in the fall where we have different parish members quite often come up and speak maybe 4 or 5 minutes about what the parish means to them, and that is very helpful and can be very impactful. But how often do we have people from the outreach ministries that you give to come and say, this outreach changed my life, or I would not have eaten a meal if it hadn't been for this parish's donation. Thank you. Most of the parishes I work with, they have outreach giving between 8 to 17% of their budget. Being able to say, this is where that money goes, this is the face behind those dollars in our community, has a huge impact on people's willingness to continue giving. Another great concrete idea. Calculate the number of volunteer hours each week that are necessary for Sunday to happen. Everything from the Flower Guild to Altar Guild to bulletins to Sunday school to music preparation to anything and everything. Calculate the number of volunteer hours and assign a monetary amount to that. It can be an arbitrary number, maybe, a little bit over minimum wage, but monetize that number and then show people on a Sunday morning exactly how many dollars of gift is being given every Sunday in order to participate. Oftentimes people are blown away. I had a parish one time who had been complaining about the fact that there didn't seem to be a lot of volunteers in their parish. And they were blown away to find out it took 140 hours a week of unpaid staff time for Sunday morning to take place. 140 hours. And then they multiplied that by 15, and they realized what a generous gift that they had been given. Part of the gift of stewardship is that we spend so much time thinking about the need and about maybe our deficit in budget or what we don't have that we don't stop to take a moment to say, what is it that we actually have that we can say thank you for? And that is part of the stewardship opportunity, because it's when we move from scarcity to abundance in our practice year-round that people feel encouraged to move in their own personal finances from scarcity to abundance. We can model that in very tangible ways. Weekly email from different ministries saying, thank you for your gift and impact. So I've seen people do some really fun things with this. Imagine your children's choir singing a song and videotaping it, and then having that sent out over YouTube, not a long song, a 30-second song sent out to all the donors and saying, thank you for your gift. In February, they get a thank you email. Thank you for your gift. It's because of your generous donation that we have a vibrant children's choir ministry, and the children's choir want to say thank you. Please click on this video in order to see this. Or you can have we have a group of folks called older, wiser laity called OWLs. They're kind of like the 65 and older crowd in our church that get together once a month for lunch. Imagine having that whole group at the luncheon do a cheers or a toast over a video and sending that out, or a picture. But creating an email and sending that out to your donors in a way for them to see faces and connecting that to your mission. Finally, another great way is to show impact of every $1 raised throughout the year. So what does that $1 go to? Nonprofits use this as a common way of showing both transparency as well as showing in very clear ways, okay, so 22 cents of my dollar went to hospitality and went to coffee in order to welcome people in. So I was working with a parish in Michigan that really jumped on this idea of giving thanks throughout the year. And, you know, they started not only doing the baskets of thanks, but also then making sure that beginning of every meeting stopped and said, thank you for a variety of ministries in their midst. But what ended up happening, and they didn't realize what happened, is that their parishioners started taking that activity of stopping and giving thanks into their workplaces. And so before you knew it, people in their community were sending thank you cards to one another. And it wasn't just their parish community, it was their local community. So the grocer with his staff, I received an email saying that the grocer started his staff meetings by saying thank you to the meat department, because it was the meat department that ensured that their mission was able to continue going. And then there was a social worker who had never been thanked in 5 years, who had never been thanked for her work, ever. And she received a thank you note from her administrator, because the administrator was a member of her parish. And I received an email from the rector of this church in Michigan, and he said, what in the world would happen if everyone did this? What would it look like? And so it was this giving thanks that caused a real transformation, not just in the parish, but in the local community. So another real easy way to sponsor stewardship year-round is to join a stewardship network. The Episcopal Church Foundation is certainly one network, but there's also 10 that I would recommend to you. Good Sense and Faith and Money Network. They can often provide easy resources that keep things fresh. I know that there was someone who logged on earlier that said that they wanted to keep things new and vibrant for their parish. And these are great ways in order to stay educated on what's current, especially as technology is changing. Another idea is to start a Christian financial counseling ministry. Now, what often surprises people is the amount of debt that each of the individuals in their parish have. As of January 2014, the U.S. household consumer has an average credit card debt of $15,270, an average mortgage debt of $149,000, just about $150,000, and an average student loan debt of $32,000. What would it look like in your parish if you had a lay person begin a Christian financial counseling ministry to help individuals and families in trouble? As families begin to get their finances in order, they may feel more free to give up their time and other resources because they would be giving out of a sense of abundance and gratefulness. But it's also a sense of responsibility. If you are looking to think about stewardship as bringing health and vitality to your community, then there's a sense of responsibility that we have to its individual members. If your congregation alone perhaps can't undertake this endeavor, think about developing it ecumenically with other congregations. I've seen that done. I can actually remember being a newlywed a long time ago, and the Presbyterian church, I was living in Alaska, a local Presbyterian church, brought in a debt counselor for the parish, and members were able to utilize that resource. And it was really quite amazing the impact that it had, just to be able to meet one-on-one with someone and talk freely. Here are those numbers that I quoted to you. In total, Americans owe about $11.3 trillion in debt. When we think about then, what is our theology of stewardship going to be? Think about what that will mean for the individual in debt. Another idea, conduct a spiritual gift seminar. This experience can bring biblical terminology and traditional concepts of Christian theology into a new relevance and applicability. Spiritual gifts are divine gifts, just as financial resources are divine gifts to be used for ministry. And learning to manage these gifts is a lifelong challenge of deepening one's understanding of discipleship and of Christian living. The personal discoveries in such a seminar could have value in assessing options for volunteer services or for new ministries within your parish. For individuals with the spiritual gift of giving, pastoral guidance, counsel, and encouragement are particularly appropriate. Plan a stewardship formation calendar. For example, what I like to do is plot out a 12-month calendar and then make a list of different activities. Oftentimes people can feel daunted by the idea of starting. What I suggest is take a month and just start using one or two easy practical ideas. Get started. Sometimes starting is better than perfect. So for example, in January, make a list of your ministries and volunteers and publish that list and think. Plan for a spring book study for all ages on stewardship and maybe start developing those ministry moments, those 1-minute moments that I talked about, not the 5-minute long testimonials that we hear during the annual giving time where there's an ask included. No, that ministry moment does not have an invite or an ask. This is an opportunity to say thank you. But in everything you do, tie everything to your mission. Why are the use of those resources important? February, begin a volunteer of the week. Begin preaching about how giving impacts mission. I think that February is a great time to uplift those saints in the church who have given so much of themselves in order to impact the mission and life of the church. This is a great time to calculate the number of volunteer hours for a Sunday morning and to sign your parish leadership up for those giving networks. So these are very easy things. Signing your parish leadership up would take less than 10 minutes, but it could have a profound impact. March, planned giving bolstering. Recruit your fall drive volunteers in March, not in September, and start planning on what is going to be the formational piece throughout the summer. So January, February, March, those were just some simple ideas, but plan throughout the entire year. Making sure also, I would highly recommend that you don't have 2 or 3 people in charge of all of these different activities, but take advantage of that spiritual gifts seminar, take advantage of what you know of your volunteers, and engage as many people as possible in this opportunity. People quite often may shy away from the idea of participating in the annual fall drive, but they would love an opportunity to tell another person thank you. So imagine engaging as many people and saying thank you to one another as possible, January through September. Now, we have some online resources that you can take advantage of, and here are some links. These are for those networks that we talked about, as well as then here are some contacts at the Episcopal Church Foundation. Terry Mathis, you saw her at the very beginning. She's the Senior Program Director. We do provide annual giving consulting services, so if that is something that you wanted to consider, feel free to reach out to either Terry or to Louise. Now, I specifically left about 15 minutes of free time available. Feel free to type in a question or feel free to tell a story. But let us know how we can best provide you with some resources with some of the information that's been provided. So as people are thinking about their questions and what they're going to type, one of the questions that I'm asked is, well, you know, we'd like to bring in a speaker in the fall, and to bolster up our annual giving. And speakers actually are a great opportunity post-Easter. When you think about your clergy after Easter, oftentimes folks are tired and are in need of a break. So bringing in someone at that time can be a great use of your resources, but it's also a great time for people then to think about stewardship in the spring. How do you see this working for small churches? Absolutely. In fact, most of the churches that I was referring to, especially that church in Michigan, are smaller in size. And that's helpful because oftentimes folks know some of the volunteer positions that are happening that others don't. So when you think about those outreach ministries in your local community, that's a great opportunity to have an outreach person come in. When you think about February, those ministry moments, those are great opportunities for people to feel rewarded. Are there other questions? Let's see. In a number of seminars I've attended, I've heard that the stewardship support aspect of the fall campaign, we've been told that the fall campaign should concentrate on mission, not the lights, heat, etc. That's true. That's absolutely true, because people do not give their resources to buildings or for heat. They want to know how is that building or that heat being used. People give to relationships and people give to causes. They quite often do not give in support of a wall or a building. They want to know what is the impact of their gift going to be on their parish life. Now, ministry moments can be given by anybody. I use the example of rectors or vicars or senior wardens, but actually in order for it to be a sustainable ministry practice, it can be taken on by anyone in your stewardship committee. And so this is something where it does require a bit of planning, but it's 1 minute. And so it's a very small level of responsibility. It can be done by the music director after the music anthem. It can be done by the children's director. It just requires people to be in the know of exactly what is the percentage of that ministry, what's the percentage of budget that ministry is being provided. How about a ministry fair to find more volunteers? Absolutely. A ministry fair is a great opportunity. Oftentimes ministry fairs are done in the fall. What it would be great would be thinking about a ministry fair that would center around gratitude as a way of providing information about how volunteer time is being utilized. How do you articulate the ministry of forming us as Christians and disciples? So specifically, when you think about small groups, you know what, Joe G. Pritchard, if you could give me a bit more clarification, that would be very helpful, but I do want to answer your question. So if you could add a little bit more, whether you're talking about one-on-one pastoral care or Christian formation or small groups or all of the above, let me know. Now, to Sadie's question, does the diversity of your congregation put things in a different perspective? How do you reach the different diverse groups with a uniform message? Sadie, well done, because we are a diverse and vibrant group of Episcopalians. Yes. For this, I would absolutely recommend looking up a webinar called Stewardship in the Next Millennium. Not to put a plug in for other webinars, but that's absolutely what I'm going to do, because in your parish there are different generational characteristics. And so different messages are going to connect with others in different ways. For example, the greatest generation has a language around responsibility and legacy and everybody doing their part, whereas the messaging for other generations doesn't connect with that at all, frankly, and that can be rather off-putting. It's more around impact for baby boomers, and for millennials or Generation Xers, it's quite a bit about relationship and connection to cause. So Stewardship in the Next Millennium, I would highly recommend. It's on our website. Download it. You can watch it for free. Absolutely. It's got a lot of tips on how to connect both your giving and your invitation, your thanking and your invitation to, through different messages and connecting to a diverse group. But Sadie, you are asking the right questions. Now, Joe G. Pritchard, this seems to be the main mission of the church. If you recall, folks, on the webinar, we were asked, how do you articulate the ministry of forming as Christians and disciples? And the later clarification is, this seems to be the main mission of the church, but we talk instead about ministry outside the congregation. So when thinking about thanking people for their worship contributions, so one of the ways that we can talk about that is how has that ministry impacted people's lives? I like the connection that you made about my earlier suggestion about bringing someone in who's been touched specifically through an outreach ministry. This certainly can be true for an internal ministry as well. Having people speak to how a ministry has changed and formed them in specific ways is important. I also think that there's a way in which you can say, during a worship service, worship is 42% of our budget, and we are delighted you all are joining us today. It's because of your generous pledges that we're able to join together as a Eucharistic community and 42% of your pledges allowed that to happen, so thank you. We have about 7 more minutes. Are there any other urgent questions? Okay, well, I am going to say thank you to you all. You have been an engaged group, and I'm grateful for the questions, because I think that the level of your proactivity in bringing year-round stewardship to your parish speaks very well to the health and vibrancy of our church as a whole. So thank you. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to direct them to Terry or Louise. Their contact information is right here. But in the meantime, I wish you many blessings in your continued role in your ministry. So thank you all. Take care.